I've been trying to film this video for a while now, but it's just not working out. Something keeps going up. So it's going to be super chill, super relaxed wrap up. I took notes on these books. I normally take notes at the end and write down my overall thoughts, but I can't find them. So we're just gonna have to go off memory. And we're going off script. Not that I ever have a script because I'm super awkward, but I'll just go ahead and do my best to recount how I felt about these books and what I liked and what I didn't like about them. So, hi everybody. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Alicia. If you're not, hey there. Today we're going to be going over my October wrap up. It's almost halfway through November now and I still haven't put up this video, so what a better time. So grab a snack, grab some tea or some coffee. Preferred poison of today is Twix. I've been eating these bad boys for like 2 weeks now because we have a bunch of them left from Halloween. We bought them. There was no trick-or-treaters, but we still bought them. Anyways, why am I still talking? Let's get right into the books. So, in the month of October, I read a total of 9 books. Out of those 9 books, I had 3 nonfiction, and within those 3 nonfiction, 2 of them were memoirs. I also read 1 science fiction book, 2 speculative fiction books. One of them could also be literary fiction, 2 thrillers, 1 fantasy, and I DNF'd 2 books. So let's see, how do we want to start this? Let's start with the 2 DNFs. So the first book that I DNF'd in the month of October is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. There was nothing wrong with this book. I just watched the movie. I already knew the plot twist. I love the movie. So when I was reading this, I actually put it down and watched the movie. And after that, I didn't really want to pick it back up. And I had been in a reading slump before and I didn't really want to be in a reading slump anymore. Again, nothing wrong. Gillian Flynn is a prolific writer, writes very well. So yeah, that's the reason I DNF'd this one. The second book that I DNF'd, and this one was a disappointment to be honest, and it's The Child Finder by Rene Denfeld. I thought I was really going to like this. It's set in Oregon where I live, and it's about a little girl that goes missing, and we have an investigator who is an expert on finding missing people, and so she goes after this missing girl who has been missing now, I believe, for months and or for weeks at least, and she's trying to find her. The reason that I didn't enjoy it is because it read a little bit young. There was these passages of like long-winded, like magical fairy tale like passages that I just thought were very, very young, and I personally didn't like that. I don't love like the really happy, bubbly, magical fairy tales at least. I like the grim, dark ones. So it just wasn't for me. I didn't like it. Sorry. So now let's get into the books that I actually read. I had a pretty good reading month. I didn't realize this, but I read 1 5-star book, 5 4-star books, 1 3.5 book, and 1 3-star book, and then I left one. I didn't rate one of the books that I read. So why don't we start with that one, the book that I didn't rate. One of the books that I finished in October and the one that I didn't rate is Atomic Habits. This is a nonfiction book that essentially gives you a solid plan for how to build and maintain healthy habits while also breaking bad ones. I usually do rate my nonfiction. I didn't rate this one because I'm still trying to put it into work, but I did find some of the methods and examples really valuable, and I'm currently putting them into use to see if I stick with them. So more to come on that. But overall, I feel like if you're someone that needs convincing why habits are important, I would suggest to pick up this book because they give a lot of tangible and really good examples of why it's important to build habits, good habits specifically, and get rid of bad ones. Since we're on the topic of nonfiction books, I'll just go ahead and continue. The next nonfiction book that I read this month was my 5-star read, and that was Between the World and Me. Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi. This is written as a form of a letter to his son, and it talks about what it's like to live as a Black man in America. And it's considered the book form of the talk that Black parents have with their children about race inequality in America, about history, about police oppression, about being Black in America and what the realities of it are. It's a very raw and powerful read. It's difficult to read at times, and it's really vulnerable and open. What I enjoyed the most about it is how raw and vulnerable he was. But what I found the most surprising about this book is that it doesn't end like on a happy note. There's no silver lining. He's very realistic about the change that needs to happen, and it's not easy change, and he knows that it probably won't happen during his lifetime. So he's very realistic about that, and I think this should be a required reading. So the next book that I finished in the month of October is Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. This was the October book pick for the Shelf Space Book Club, that is run by Jessie May. I'll go ahead and leave that information down below in the description box. And oh my goodness, I love this book. It was my first sci-fi epic story that I read, and I loved every second of it. James A. Corey is actually a pseudonym for 2 other authors, and this is the first installment in a very epic 9-installment series. There is a Hulu adaptation for this, I believe, and I highly recommend you pick it up. It's a space opera, detective, noir, mystery, horror, sci-fi read. If that doesn't catch your drift, I don't know what else will. It's so good. I do have a dedicated video for this book, so I'll go ahead and link that in the cards if you want a more in-depth, not spoiler review, but wow, so good. I loved it, and I'm going to continue on with the series. The next book that I finished in the month of October was another audiobook, and that was Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. Nothing to See Here is a fantasy book where we follow the life of our main character, Lillian, who reconnects with her college roommate. Her college roommate reaches out after a few years, and she wants Lillian to come and stay with her at her house. She is married to a politician, and she wants Lillian to take care of her 2 stepchildren who magically combust and catch on fire. Yes, they're fire children. I wholly love this book. It was sweet. It touched me right here in my heart. It was so heartwarming, and honestly, I give props to the writer, because you have to be a damn good writer to write a story about fire children, make it seem believable, but also have it be heartwarming, and that's exactly what this book is. If you're in a reading slump, I recommend reading this actually, because it's not fast-paced by any means, but it's just very funny and witty and heartwarming, and it has all these little good things that will make you have a really good day. It's very heartwarming, and I loved it. The next book that I finished in the month of October is The Memory Police, and this is by Yoko Ogawa. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This is one of the speculative fiction books, but I think it's also a literary fiction book. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a really creative and good concept. We follow our main character. She lives on an island where things start to disappear. And at first it's objects such as a ribbon or glasses, and these literally pop out of existence, so much that people are kind of compelled to get rid of these items, and then essentially they can't even remember the name of them, or they can't remember any emotions attached to these objects, so everything is erased out of existence. So we start with small objects like this, and then essentially we start to get other disappearances like birds and trees and other stuff. And we have a group called the Memory Police that makes sure that these rules are enforced and that these objects are completely destroyed, because there are some people who don't forget, and these people are persecuted and they have to hide. We follow her as she tries to hide her editor, because he's one of those people that doesn't forget. It's a haunting story. It's haunting in the sense that it's scary. When I was reading this, the entire time I was thinking, what if one day I have dementia or Alzheimer's and I forget everything and everyone, and I can't find meaning in objects that were once really personal to me, or I can't find connections with things that grew up in our histories, and it's haunting in that way. This is not going to be a book for you if you like everything. If you like plots that are tied up, it leaves it open-ended. The disappearances are not explained. We never find out who makes the choices for these items to disappear on the island, and we don't know what happens to our protagonist. It's left very open-ended. But if you like open-ended books where the author doesn't guide you to a conclusion and instead the author lets you sync with your thoughts and really apply your own meaning to the book, then I think you'll really like it. The next book that I read in the month of October is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This was the other speculative fiction book that I read this month, and wow. this one hit very hard because things like this could happen to women. Besides it being a speculative fiction novel, it's also a dystopian novel. So we're in the future in what they call the Republic of Gilead. And here, basically, women no longer have agency or autonomy. There had been declining birth rates, and because of that, women were forced into a role where they're basically used to breed, and that's it. We're being reduced to our bodily function. So yeah, it was really scary to read from that perspective, how it's very easy for men in power to kind of install this in a democratic country, and how it's so slowly built in that you don't really notice the changes until it's too late. The reason I only gave it a 3 out of 5 stars is because I found the narrative to be a little bit confusing. We do follow 3 separate timelines. We follow the timeline before the Republic of Gilead came into place, while our main character is in the school teaching them how to be handmaids, and then in the future, or in our present tense within the book, where she's been assigned to a household. And the story isn't always linear, so it is kind of difficult to follow as you switch back and forth, and I found that to be a little bit confusing, and because of that I wasn't as immersed in the book as I wanted to be. But it's still, I think, a good read, especially because it's such a classic. So I think it holds up. It's just a little bit difficult to follow the narrative at times, and this is the first book in a duology. The Testaments did come out last year, I believe, and it won the Man Booker Prize, I believe. So I'm going to pick that up because I want to find out what happens to our main character. We are left in a really big cliffhanger. So the next book that I finished this month was another memoir, and this one was called Children of the Land by Marcelo Hernandez Castillo. That one I listened to on audiobook, just as Atomic Habits. That was an audiobook as well. I forgot to mention that. And I gave Children of the Land a 4 out of 5. Children of the Land is a memoir where we follow Marcelo as he grows up in the United States. He was undocumented and his family was undocumented, and he talks about the struggles of what it's like to live in this sort of no man's land where you don't really belong in Mexico and you don't really belong in the United States because of being undocumented, and how that intersectionality plays into your life and how it ruins people's lives, specifically immigrants' lives, when all they're trying to do is survive. So if you want a book where you get an insight into the experience or the daily life of an immigrant and what their struggles are, what their thoughts are, this is one that I highly recommend. It's beautifully written, and it also touches a little bit on histories between the United States and Mexico and on some immigration policies. The last 2 books that I read in the month of October were the 2 thrillers, and I gave them both 4 out of 5 stars. The first one that I want to talk about is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, I believe. And wow, this book was so good. Also, the protagonist's name is Alicia. My name is Alicia, but it's spelled the same way, so I thought that was really cool. Essentially, this book is about a woman named Alicia who is accused of murdering her husband. After that, she is locked up, and she is locked up in a mental institution where she never speaks a word to anybody. In the story, we follow our main character, Theo Faber, who is a criminal psychotherapist, and he's obsessed with finding out why Alicia killed her husband, and he wants to find out so much so that he ends up taking a job where she currently is, even though that place is kind of losing its funding and eventually will close, and he has a very good stable job right now. He leaves all that behind, comes to work for this institution because he really wants to find out what happens, and from there it's just a wild ride. I don't read a lot of thrillers, so I didn't catch the twist, but even if you know the twist, I think it's still a good book to pick up because right from the beginning you are engaged. It's super riveting, really well paced. It's a really good length of a novel. It's not too long, and honestly I felt like every single word in here was intentional in that it wasn't too long and it wasn't too short. I wasn't left wanting more. I was thoroughly pleased by the end of this book, and it was just wild. I really enjoyed it. The last book that I read in the month of October is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Iain Reid, and this book is truly a mindfuck. Like, there's no other way to describe this book. It might not be for everybody because it's super slow. It's different than The Silent Patient. This one takes off right from the beginning and you're engaged every single chapter. I'm Thinking of Ending Things. It's more of a slow burn thriller, and it's more about the ride than the destination. Iain Reid does a very wonderful job at slowly building suspense so that it seeps into your skin and you're at the edge of your seat by the end, and you're honestly a little bit creeped out, and he really gets the atmosphere down throughout the book. However, there are a lot of like intellectual talks in here that can throw the book off balance. So it's also a smart book. In our plot, we follow our main character who is going to her partner's hometown to visit his parents, while on the road trip there, she's thinking of ending things with him. That's as much as I can tell you about the story because you just have to read it. It's so short. The end is truly not for everybody. I personally had to go back and reread the first couple of chapters to kind of understand what was going on, but once I did, I was like, wow, soul. But really good read. So those were all the books that I read in the month of October. Let me know down below if you've read any of them, if you share my thoughts, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.